So while I'm giving Michael a moment to dial in, I'll just welcome you to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. And today is Friday, August the 18th, 2023. And our calling number is 563-999-3581. And press 1, and that puts you into queue to talk to us. And we would love to hear your comments and questions, because that makes this your show. And we had a lot of people in the chat room yesterday. It was good to see Bob from Australia. He says he's doing better. Thank you for holding the space for him. And we had I'll be getting the links. Yesterday afternoon, the book club did A Course in Miracles, and the title of that was The Name of God is My Inheritance, quoting on it, and I'll be putting that on the website later today after I take Aria home. And we have, for those of you who are participating in the Still Point Breathing, that takes place tomorrow, and every third Saturday and Sunday. So at 11 o'clock on both of those days, we have Mindshifters and Still Point Breathing. So if you're participating in that, then watch your email or your text. Michael is requesting that you go ahead and choose 2 numbers, and he's assigning the Mindshifters so that you'll go ahead and be working on that before breathing tomorrow. We have a couple of new people that are joining us tomorrow, and I believe that Terry Bowling's coming back with us, and Yinka and Julia in Oregon. Well, I think she's in Spain right now, but she's going to join us. And then also Julia Dobos in Washington and Sarah in Indiana. So we got people all over that are going to be participating in the breathwork tomorrow. So if you would like to participate in that, then contact Michael or myself and get registered, and we will be glad for you to be part of our group. And so I'm waiting on Michael. I don't think he's in yet. And wait just a minute, sweetheart. Ari's wanting to ask me a question. So, all right, I see his.
Here.
I had to dial in as host, so there he is. Paul, pardon me.
Hey there, dear heart. Welcome, everybody. Delighted that you're here. And ready to head to the next layer of conversation about this awesome thing called first century Aramaic forgiveness. Miss Jeanie, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Oh, good. Okay. It seemed like something was amiss, but cool. Well, yesterday we were looking at the pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind, the things that the mind tell us will solve our problems, but will do nothing but exacerbate our problems. So those, just to run through them quickly so they're fresh from yesterday's conversation. If you want to get into more detail about them, you can listen to yesterday's show. But the first of the dozen or so pseudo-solutions we're going to talk about is if I could just figure this out. How, why, what happened? Second pseudo-solution is fighting. Winning becomes most important. And one thinks, if I could just beat them, then everything would be okay. Then, of course, if I could just let them or myself off the hook and call that forgiveness, which, of course, doing the pardoning game can be very satisfying in a relationship by letting someone else off the hook for what they've done. But if you're trying to let them off the hook for what's happening inside of you, you're not going to have much success. And then, of course, if I could just fix, which really means if I could control them, if I or they were just good enough, if I could find somebody to love me, and of course, in the culture, that really means approve of me, or someone to love that I could approve of. When we come into the world, we are the conscious, active presence of love, and the world specializes in knocking that out of us, and then telling us to go out and find somebody to love or somebody to love us. If I could just control everything and everyone, then I'd be okay. Or Then there's the pseudo-solution of struggling to make up for a non-being life. Then, of course, one can try to hide their pain deeply enough into their brain's image of others, that is, blame deeply enough. And, if I could just convince them that they're the problem in my life, they're the reason my mind, my physiology is producing this traumatic experience. That usually comes in the form of they made me angry, they made me sad. That's the starting point of it. And, of course, if you're angry, you're sad. You're not angry, you're sad because of what somebody's done. You're angry or you're sad because there's sadness in you. And if you want to resolve it, you've got to go in and resolve it. So these are all pseudo-solutions. Then many people go to, well, if I could just take the easy way out, I'll just stay on autopilot and, do the behaviors of the past, play out the games of the culture. If I could just be right, prove that I'm right, and never have to suspect myself, prove that I'm not responsible. And a big one is to obfuscate, to distract, to confuse, to switch issues, and of course, part of that game of obfuscate is, well, you did it too. Well, you know something? Maybe I did. But that's not what we're talking right now. We're talking about the fact that you did it. Or I did it. So let's stay with that. And yes, maybe there's a separate conversation for when, one or the other did the same thing. But let's resolve what's going on between us right now. And then the final pseudo-solution we talked about is if I could just get out of here, just the need to escape, leave, pretending that I'm not angry or afraid, get rid of them. And this escape game, this having to leave gets to be pretty old. And behind all of those pseudo-solutions, there's always a goal. In order for the mind to come up with a behavior, whatever it's based in, there's always a goal driving perception, and the specific identification of the goal that's driving pained perception is a critical component of healing. So the whole painful experience that the mind produces is a result of hostility or fear that's resonated by events in our world and in combination with the goals that we hold within our minds. And so, there's some basic things that people are after, and it can be helpful to realize some of those basics in determining what your goals are, because oftentimes goals are unconscious, they're automatic, and people they don't even know what's driving their own minds. So goals can range from, wanting to be cherished, wanting to be esteemed, to be safe, to be seen, to be heard, to be important, to win, to be honored, to have sex, to stay sane, to survive, to feel fulfilled. Things like having power drive a lot of people, be respected. The goal to belong, the need to belong or be accepted. Just the need to express can be a powerful one. To be approved of, to be acknowledged, appreciated, be in control. The goal for survival, to have food, to survive. To experience, and sadly it's usually experiencing approval, not actually love, but to experience what people call love, or to express love, to get cooperation, to have prosperity, to feel powerful, the goal to better oneself, and of course the myriad of things that can drive perception. And whenever I'm in pain, if I recognize that my goal is what's causing my mind to use pained content to build this particular perception, even though my mind is showing me a picture of you, if I'm in pain, my mind is projecting my own unconscious pain into my brain's image of you. And so as I become aware, then the core of the forgiveness process, once having identified the goal, is to cancel the goal, not because you don't want what you want, not because you can't have it, not because it wouldn't be wonderful to have it, but you recognize that when you load this goal in your mind uses your own pain content to build your reality and your experience. And so by canceling the goal, that reality, that experience collapses. And so when one cancels a goal, then the mind's conscious construct, which is usually informed by unconscious content, collapses, and one gets to drop into their unconscious content. And that's where the cleanup process begins. That's where the cleaning up of the mind begins. Now, oftentimes, if one is not having their goals achieved, anesthetics become the object of the search of one's life. I mean, to the point where people destroy themselves in search of an anesthetic. You know, listen to the numbers of people that are being destroyed by opiates, or I should say destroying themselves in the pursuit of opiates, something to anesthetize against their pain. And of course, the very basic definition of a codependent relationship is where I want to believe and I want somebody else to be responsible for my pain. So if I can't really prove or get somebody else to say, okay, it is my fault, I'm the one who caused it, then, and I'm not acquainted with the forgiveness process, I'm not aware of how to go inside myself and clean up this pain, then some sort of anesthetic is used to close off the thought disorders, to hide the seemingly unresolvable emotions and pain. Of course, the first step in that is denial. And in this work, our definition of denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. And that's the beginning point of an ever deeply destructive cycle of false perception. Denial results in dissociation, hiding by the mind of the truth in order that I can believe my hallucinated lie, the construct of my mind. Perception, by definition, is something that the mind generates in order to help us to believe that what's happening inside of us isn't ours. So the mind hides truth so that I can believe what my hallucination, my perception. The next step in that cycle is the projection of what I'm hidden from myself into my mind's image, which is really painted on the inside of my eyeballs of them, whoever the problem is. That cycle is completed when I then externalize my perceptual image. I really pretend that what I'm looking at, the body, quote unquote, that's causing me so much pain, the picture that I'm seeing in my mind, I'm pretending that it's actually out there. And when I do that, the misdirection that occurs, my mind generates that false perceptual constructs and hides the truth, and it seems like I'm protecting myself from my self-induced pain, but all I'm doing is projecting my pain. The pain's still there. The pain remains. The pain is still experienced, even though I put it into my brain's image of someone else. So this mechanism of protection is somewhat like an anesthetic, in that while not covering the pain altogether, it directs the mind to put one's pain into the brain's image of another in order to avoid facing the internally generated pain truly and directly. Game is absolutely everything. The denial cycle and anesthetics can appear to be pseudo-solutions in that they seem to solve our problems, but the pain's still felt. The truth is, if I'm in pain, my thinking is in error, and I have work to do. Now, when denial and anesthetics compromise intelligence and numb us to the warning signals that would inform us, they really complicate our challenges and actually end up intensifying the need for self-correction, of uncovering, engaging in truth. The mind energy behind our pseudo-solutions create aberrant psychological disturbances and physiological interference called chemistry in the cell. When that happens, we produce mental constructs and perceptions that block truth. Now, addiction becomes tempting when the internal, quote-unquote, chemistry of the current pseudo-solution isn't working effectively to shut down whatever I'm trying to avoid feeling. Anesthetics and addictions, the most common one being busyness, are often used to hide stress under the pretense that we're managing our stress. Ultimately, denial and addictions do nothing but create and reinforce living an unconscious life. It's interesting, a few years back we did a workshop in a super high security prison in a town called Ionia, Michigan. It's a former Civil War site that they've turned into a prison, and they bring all of the worst prisoners from the state of Michigan and house them in that prison. And their incarceration rates or time frame is anywhere from 25 years to life. Pretty awesome going into that prison, especially the warden who, and I've never had this before, I've been in a lot of jails and a lot of prisons all over the country. And I've never been personally greeted by the warden of the prison who escorted us in, walked us past security and showed us to our classroom and stayed for the whole workshop. And in later sessions, actually sat in on some of the sessions personally and shared with the prisoners his personal experience of the process that he was going through in the same way that the prisoners shared in the processes they were going through. It's pretty powerful. But when we completed there, we had a local teacher who decided to pick up on what we'd done. He'd been introduced by our being there, and continued with a study group in the prison with the inmates that were interested. And he did an 8-week series. Actually, he and a young lady who assisted him, who sometimes runs our switchboard, and they did an 8-week series, and it's always been and they decided to do a Laws of Living intensive in the prison for these prisoners. Laws of Living was originally designed for the prison system. And the tradition has always been, in the early days, if people weren't invested in the course, then they didn't usually get much out of it. They didn't invest much in it if they didn't invest in it. So with a prison where people are doing 25 years to life, of course, they have no money to invest in it. So the investment that we set up was a requirement in order to be a part of the course, was that they had to do 5 worksheets a day through the period of the 8-week lead up to the course. And the day that everybody showed up to the course and they were to have their homework with them to validate their entry into the course, every person who had wanted to be part of the course had exactly the same reason why they did not have that homework complete. They didn't have the price of their ticket, which was worksheets. And every person, now these are people who are locked in their cells for 23 out of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're in a cell. And every one of them had the same excuse for not having that homework completed. And that was that they were too busy. If you take a look, you've been listening to the show for a while, perhaps I suggest you do, a worksheet a day or 5 worksheets a day or whatever. Did you do it? And if you didn't do it, what did you tell yourself? Oh, I was too busy. That's the most common one. And people can become addicted to, well, anything. In this work, we define addiction as the compulsive use of any anesthetic. Any person, place, circumstance, substance, situation, or activity to do 2 things: to avoid listening to one's highest guidance and or to keep from feeling and dealing with stress or with any mind energy they hold within them and emotions that do not come from love. So again, it's the compulsive use. It isn't that someone takes a drink, it's that one has to have a drink. And that's what turns something into an addiction. So these behaviors tend to dull awareness or shut down contact with thought disorders. It's a way to avoid one's own mind. So here are some examples. Now, some of them may fall into the category of addiction and some not. So people do things like, or their avoidance goes like this. I don't need to feel my pain if I hang out with Bill because Bill keeps me laughing. Or when I have a rough day at work, the world fades away after just 6 drinks. Or I get so absorbed in the TV, I'm able to forget about my life. Something that, at least in my awareness, is relatively new. When I was a kid, I'd never heard of such a thing. But if I inflict enough pain on myself, I will not have to deal with this. We hear about young people cutting themselves. And it's a way of controlling what they don't know how to address in themselves, what seems to be an uncontrollable pain, with a pain that they can control. Or another one is, I avoid connection because it reminds me of my pain. So these are all things that one can become addicted to. So what we suggest is that you start looking at any particular tactic or behavior that you use, any pseudo-solution, when you're in fear or hostility. And so you might just want to think about what kinds of, have a pen handy, what kind of things do you do? And I've got a list here. I'm going to kind of run through this list. And, if there are things that you find yourself doing, you might just want to make a note and do some work around it, do some worksheets around it or what have you, whatever, use the tools. And or you might look at tactics that you observed your power person do, looking from that perspective of the codependence work. So, of course, the number one, the most common one is the denial, the blame, dissociation, and projection. You made me mad, so it's your fault, blame. I hide the real cause of my pain. And then, by hiding the real cause of my pain, because energetically I've intensified my pain, now my intensified pain sends out a signal that draws somebody in to play that out with me. And when they play that out with me, they resonate what I've dissociated from, and what I've hidden from myself, I literally use to build my brain's image of them. It's called projection. Projection is not what our culture tends to define it as, is taking something that's inside of me and putting it outside of me. No. Projection is taking something that's inside of me and painting pictures on the inside of my eyeballs with it, pictures of somebody else that I'm blaming. And then those pictures are externalized. Pretend that what my brain is showing me that I think is coming in through my eyes is actually outside of me. So to dissociate and project is a big happening in our culture. Tactics. Disassociation. Different than dissociate. Dissociate is to hide something inside of me that I don't want to look at or deal with. Disassociate is to just totally and completely disconnect from my own reality, from my own body, from life. So what are some of the other things people do? Yell, scream, use the voice, be cute, coy, use distractions, gaslight, lie, insincerity, deception, false religiosity, criticize either self or others, or both, degrade self, others, or both, covert, to convey a different message with my voice tone than with my words, leave, escape, run away, go numb, greed, become self-absorbed, false pride, turn to entertainment, insist on my need to be right, make excuses, many people avoid their emotions by staying in their heads, by intellectualizing. I'm willing to look within. Many will, in order not to deal with what's going on inside themselves, dish out a daily dose of disapproval to self or others, fall out of harmony with just and fair behavior by being unfair or unkind, envy, cheat, attack, destroy, attempt to get even, vengeance, steal, OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder. When you apply forgiveness, obsessive-compulsive disorders become obsessive-compulsive blessings. Defensiveness, have to take a position, puff self up, rage, threaten, pressure, intimidate, use sarcasm, become controlling. You ever played that game of controlling? By tantrums, going silent, withdrawal, run, hide, become abusive, either physically, emotionally, verbally, get boisterous, punish, harm others or self, or fantasizing punishment or harm can be another mechanism the mind will use. Become a pleaser. Engage in self-terrorizing thoughts, or terrorize. We're watching this big time in the political world right now, terrorizing others with thoughts, words, actions. Judge self, judge others. Make up stories, lies about others or self to block the truth. Apologize, become violent, either in thoughts, behavior, entertainment. Never own or admit the truth. Give in, give up, take the easy way. Play the game of never showing weakness. Be vulnerable. Rage. Food's a big one. Big avoidance. Sugar especially. Alcohol. Legal or illegal drugs. Busyness again. Some people take up exercise as a way to avoid. Exercise is a wonderful thing, but if you're using it to avoid, it turns into something that can be destructive. Spending, shopping can be a big one for a lot of people. Of course, sex, promiscuity, pornography. Big avoidance mechanisms. Seduction. Reading can become an avoidance. Criminality, laziness. Playing games, TV. Social media, violence. Remember, Jeanie and I were working with someone, and this person, we'd gotten a pretty good sense of what was going on with them, but each time Jeanie was doing private work with them, and each time that she would work with them, she charges by the hour, and this person would spend the majority of their hour telling their story. And it became actually, I've had it happen in the past where someone just quit working with me because they just wanted to tell their story. They didn't want feedback. They didn't want to heal. They didn't want to use the tools. They just wanted to tell their story. Irritation can be a way to avoid. Spiritual rituals. Get that feel-good music going. Then you can avoid what's happening inside of you rather than step in and deal with it. Excess cleaning. Meditation. People try to transcend above the issue. I remember working with a physician in St. Louis, and when I was speaking in St. Louis, he'd invite me to stay at his house. And he was someone that was always irritated, pretty much always in irritation, upset, especially around his family. And when he'd get into this upset, he'd go, I have to meditate. And he'd go and get, he'd do his meditation thing, see, everything's fine. And then 2 minutes later, he's back in that irritation again. It's like, that's just an avoidance mechanism. Meditation can be a wonderful thing. But if you use it to avoid, it's an addiction. Again, anything can be used as an addiction. Frustration, gossip, complaining, become a workshop groupie. People have seen that over the years. They come to the workshops, but do they ever use the tools? I'll say, well, have you ever done the work of such and, oh yeah, I did that workshop. Have you did that? Yeah, I did. Oh yeah, I went to that one. Oh yeah, I know about that. I know about that. I know about that. It's like, did you ever do any of it? Pick up a worksheet and actually use it? You actually put the pen to the paper and use the tools? Diversion, distraction, escapism, leaving, running away are all the same game. Another way to avoid can be fear-based concern about others, children, self, parents, the world. Lack of trust. Separate your life into pieces. I have friends in this arena, but I never introduce them to these friends over here. Avoidance, again, a form of denial or dissociation. We talked earlier about obfuscation, creating big, billowy excuses and distractions instead of actually dealing with an issue. So it creates confusion. Playing the victim can be a powerful way, becoming the drama queen or the drama king. Stories, distractions to create avoidance. Some people turn to fantasy. They make up facts to justify their conclusion. The mind presents a reality that is totally, completely illogical, and somebody will make up a story about, to make it reasonable. It's just like to make stuff up, just to make it believable to oneself or to others. So to look at the tactics, if you've ever used them, to avoid dealing with the issues in your life, especially owning the power person behaviors, the power person dynamics that have been established. And that, again, is usually something from early childhood. So there are a few of the things that people do to avoid, and if you have any others to share with us, you can push one. Tell us about what's going on for you. Is this resonating things for you? Does it arouse any questions? What's happening in your world? If you've got anything to share with us, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you'll be listening to the show. And then if you push one, we'll be having a conversation. So, Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
There is no hand up, however, except yours.
Yes.
I'm not sure when it popped through. It probably was at the time, you were even talking about workshop junkies and things like that. But Susan wrote and said, you need to add listening to the radio show and a laughing face.
Well, hopefully that's opening the space for processing, Susan, rather than avoidance.
Yeah. And she says, your app has convinced me that doing a worksheet is a form of prayer. And there's actually, and you've met her before in the Steel Point, Sarah, she calls them prayer sheets. And she does a little longer version of it. Hold on, sweetie, I'm talking. But she calls them prayer sheets instead of worksheets. Oh, a couple hands just went up.
Awesome. Let's say hello. Great.
Okay. The first one is Dan757. You're on the air.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, good sir. Welcome. Hey, good to be heard.
Yeah,
how do you be?
I be good. I don't always like all my feelings, and I was sort of resonating with a lot of different stuff there. Some of the avoidance tactics. I'm kind of like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure I used about pretty much all of these, and doing this work, I think something I've been struck by is just the amount of pain that I'm storing on the inside. And, I seem like I'm recently going through like rapid, healing crisis, and then, feeling really good, and then healing crisis and feeling really good. And I was kind of wondering if that's a, typical possibility or something that could happen, because that seems to be sort of rapid fire for me right now. And then I had some realizations recently that I want to share, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very typical. Oftentimes people work around an issue and they'll get stuck on a plateau, and they'll work and think, geez, this isn't working, I'm not getting anywhere. Then all of a sudden, once they hit that next level of vitality, bing, then comes a breakthrough. And that's when, especially when you get a shift in vitality, then you can start moving through things, high speed, fast forward. I know for me personally, I look back at the early days of doing this work, and something would come up, and it might be something that I'd work on for days and maybe even into weeks. And then in later years, with the practice, I can go through 2 or 3 of those in a day, as you've developed the skill and the ability and the willingness to move through it. So, yeah, that's very common.
Okay, yeah, because it's been up and down recently, and, just kind of diving in. And, I had mentioned, and please feel free to set limits with me on the time, because I can just sort of start talking and lose track. I want everyone to get a chance to get on here. But, I shared
with you, and you've got our attention.
Okay. So, I think I've spoken with you a little bit about the relationship breakup that I've been going through, and
right.
I had done a lot of worksheets on her, on that situation, on myself, in regard to that situation, on the realities that seem to resonate from earlier in my life. And, you know, it's like what has slowly dawned on me and become a little more apparent is that after we had split up, I began to project onto my image of her some of the sort of good qualities that I had buried in myself from childhood, the innocence, the kindness, the sweetness, the lovingness, the spontaneity, the sort of purity of heart. I projected those things on my image of her and imagined that I had hurt that part of her, and I had a lot of mourning and weeping and grief over that. And what I sort of realized is that I think that I was unable to feel those feelings directly for that part of myself, which is what I had wanted to grieve and feel sad about, because I buried that part of myself. And so instead I imagined, well, I did it to her. And I had a moment where, you know, I had sort of decided I would like to see if she's willing to try this again, and we sort of got in touch, and it ended up with a phone call where she was sort of cursing me out and saying I'm just the worst person ever, and she was very angry, and it was like this contrast between what I had projected on my image of her and what she was displaying in that moment gave me some freedom.
The question there, the question I would ask there is, were you able to stay connected to the presence of love as she hurled those accusations at you? Were you able to be the space for her? You know, perhaps, you know, if there was a genuine possibility of relationship there, perhaps the work that you had done would be the space in which it would become safe enough for her to start to deal with some things that she had not been dealing with. And so oftentimes just being that space is a real key to moving through things for both people involved in a relationship.
Well, it threw me off so much that I think my response was kind of like nonchalant and a little bit odd, and I even kind of like giggled at one point, and I don't feel good about that, but I was just so, and it, to me, at least my story is that she was so angry that she wasn't able to hear anything I was saying, and she did end up hanging up on me. And so I don't know if it's, you know, the healthiest thing for me to reach back out to her. I don't think it is right now. But the odd thing about what sort of moved within me, I don't know, it's just very, very, gets tangled and complex. I have a lot of trouble with like figuring it, like with as far as the worksheet, what exactly to put in that trigger spot. And then, you know what I mean? Because I can never tell, is she the trigger? Is a part of me the trigger? Is it both? And that's with anything I may do work on, not just this relationship.
Sure. Well, if you're in interaction with her and she's in that kind of angry state and you go into upset, then you could do worksheets from both perspectives. One would be where she would be number 1C, that she's the object of attention, and you might do worksheets around yourself as the object of attention and the response you see coming from within yourself. So one worksheet might look like, you know, she's so enraged, what's wrong with her? And then the worksheet that you might do on yourself might look like, you know, what's going on with me that I'm buying into this, that I believe that this is true about me? Well, and so each one of those in that circumstance would produce a different healing result in terms of those massive unconscious dynamics that we tend to carry around within us.
Yeah, it's just very thick, you know?
Yeah. And it can be pretty complex.
When she got that angry at me, I did not get reactive. Right. I don't know what happened. That's sort of where something clicked, but I also, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with it.
My offering one would be that she didn't get angry with you, Dan. She just got angry. She has anger. You know, we live in a culture where we convince each other that we're responsible for each other's emotional states. And so my offering would be, she's never been angry with you or anybody else. There's just anger in there for her to resolve.
Yeah.
And then do I choose to be the space that supports her in healing that anger? Do I say, I've had enough? Of course, I have to make my own choices there. But to believe that she's angry with you would be another piece of worksheet or another worksheet to do, perhaps touching in and looking at the power person dynamic. How much time in your life was your power person, quote unquote, angry with you, and or how did they express their anger? And that might produce another healing result in terms of cleaning up the gunk of the past in your own mind.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of that there. I think it was sort of like in the relationship, I can see how I wanted to, or at some level signed up to try to be responsible for her feelings. Like I can see now that was the dynamic, or at least part of it was that I wanted to be everything she ever thought she needed. I wanted to play that role, and I think she wanted me to be that. So I think there was like an unconscious agreement between us to have a codependent relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you ever have a power person who wanted to be or implied that you were responsible for what they were feeling, what they were doing, what they were
absolutely.
experiencing?
Exactly how I sort of grew up. I mean, that was seemed to be my whole purpose was to be responsible for making someone else feel better and resolving their anger and pain.
Well, that's a pretty big job assignment.
Yeah.
About as big as it gets. I mean, it's being responsible for our own is enough, let alone somebody else's.
Yeah.
But that's the state of the world. That's pretty much the state of the world, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's not even that, I always thought it was unique. It's not really unique at all. But the power person for me, at least my story was that my power person kind of crushed my and joyfulness and love and whatnot. That's my story. And then my story was that I did that to my ex-girlfriend.
Right. So notice that in the same way that I just pointed out that, you didn't make her angry. She's got anger. Notice that you have a story that your power person crushed that in you. And my offering would be, no, your power person didn't crush that in you. It was in there because it's in there, and now your job is to clean it up. And it's denial to think, well, I experienced that because of what my power person did. And undoing that denial by taking responsibility. So I would say probably a very productive series of worksheets to do would probably be worksheets on believing that your power person crushed the aliveness, the innocence, and such. That will probably open some huge spaces for you.
Because the truth is that I'm maintaining that type of energy where I'm believing that that's suppressed in me, right? Like that's
correct.
Okay.
And that's where those worksheets will be. I think you'll find them really productive.
Awesome.
And then to do the same processing around what you believe to be your responsibility with her, that, you passed on to her what your power person did to you. And yes, my mind has realities that my power person did that to me. And so what I'll tend to do is, whatever behaviors and, in that power person dynamic, I don't know how familiar you are with that, but there are only 3 behaviors possible once a power person dynamic has been installed in someone's mind. And the behaviors are all related to the level of stress that we're under. So when there's little or no stress, one will do whatever it is in their lives that they did to get along with their power person. When stress starts to build, the automatic decision system mind will kick them into doing what they did to resist and survive with their power person. And then when they become ultra stressed, they'll do what their power person did to them that they hated the most. And so if you hated that, your perception was that your power person suppressed those things in you, so here you are now turning around accusing yourself of doing it to her. And maybe you did do those same kinds of actions that you perceived had that impact on you. And as you undo those energetic patterns, not only will you be free of them, but you'll start to free your bloodline from those dynamics. Your generations.
Wow. That's pretty awesome.
And I don't know if you've touched into the commitment as yet. Have you looked at the commitment from the Healing Through Relationships workshop?
No, and I was going to ask you where I can get more information on the power person dynamic. Is that kind of where that is?
Well, the power person, there's a video on our website called Codependence to Interdependence, and that goes through and into the whole power person dynamic. Or I think maybe Terry had shared with you, he recently started to do the Codependence to Interdependence Intensive. That's a self-study intensive that we have. And that workshop actually is 90 hours of video work. It's actually a Zoom intensive that we've combined that has all of the teaching from codependence to interdependence, why is this happening to me again, healing through relationships, communication, did you hear what I think I said, and mind shifters and still point breathing. So there are 90 hours of instructional videos in the self-study. That's something that Terry just recently started. I know you guys have been working together. Actually, I mentioned to Terry because he was saying, you know, the work that you were moving into and doing, that was before you and I connected. And I suggested it might be something you guys might want to just coordinate and, you know, create a buddy system, an accountability and a conversation and work on together. And it's a really powerful compendium of information, and it starts out with a personal code evaluation, and our personal code evaluation is a digitized, trimmed down copy of the MMPI, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, and it looks at or scores you in 10 different areas and looks at where the blocks are in the mind. So the intensive starts out saying, okay, so here are the places where your mind tends to block you and where your greatest learning is. And then there are specific tools in each of those. Out of 10 areas that the evaluation lays out, we give each person who does an intensive 3 assignments. So the different areas that it looks at stress management, it looks at the ability to honor others, to honor self, to honor truth, to honor laws of living, freedom from fear, freedom from hostility, use of will, nutrition, digestion, toxicity. So it covers all of those areas, and it looks and says, okay, so here's where you're most blocked. So here's your number 1 assignment for this intensive. Here's your second, here's your number 2 assignment, number 3, and then there's specific tools, things to do about that. And so with the fact that you and Terry have been working together, that might be something you might want to coordinate with him and just kind of kick back and forth together between you and work on.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Well, if you're interested in doing that, we can talk after the show is over, and get you set up to do that if you want to move forward with that. And you'd shared there were some other things you wanted to put forward that were coming up for you.
I think that may be enough for one time.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks for the willingness and putting it out there and holding the space. And what I'll do when we finish the show, I'll send you a copy of the commitment. And whether you choose to communicate with this young lady or not, one of the things you might want to do, I'd suggest you might do, is either printed, or you could just text it or email it to her, the commitment with the, the sentiment that here's where I'm moving in my life, if the commitment makes sense to you. And
Okay.
if there's any possibility of us reopening a relationship, this is where I want to go. I'm not perfect. I know you're not perfect. So rather than playing this game of blaming each other and having it bounce back and forth with this separation and anger and such, let's recognize that we both are coming into this relationship with our stuff, and let's join in supporting each other and moving through the layers. I know we had a couple who, she had started to do this work and her husband didn't want to have anything to do with it. And finally, after some stress and conflict, they decided they were going to divorce. They had 3 kids at that point, and they decided to divorce. And she called me and she said, Michael, I'm not sure. I don't know what to do. We're finished. So what I suggested to her was that she take the Healing Through Relationships workshop and watch it, and invite him to watch it. And she called me back. They literally had their bags packed at the door, ready to move out of the house, and it was done. And they agreed that they'd sit together and watch the Healing Through Relationships video. And within a week, her contact with me was, we're back on our second honeymoon, and we're just working together to clean up our stuff, for each of us to be responsible for and clean up what we carried into this relationship, rather than just playing this blame game.
Yeah.
So it can transform everything. So I'll text you that commitment, and you can go to the website and format a copy of it if you want to print it, or you can just highlight it and copy it, and if that makes sense, text it to her, and who knows what space it opens.
Yeah. Okay.
I've seen many people over the years literally on the verge of separation, divorce, when they look at that, it's like, oh, I didn't know that was possible. Okay, I'm ready to do this. And it changes everything. And I've seen other people who picked it up. Actually, I think about one couple in particular who were, again, on the verge of divorce, and they picked it up, and they were, they were ready for war. They were ready for, going to court and seeing who could get how much money out of who else. The whole thing was this crazy time, and they decided that their relationship, it had been a very long-term relationship. They'd been married for some 30 years, and they decided that their relationship was over. That was no longer appropriate, but they were able to use the commitment to divorce amicably. They didn't have to kill each other in court. They didn't have to spend all their money and their resources fighting each other in court. Yeah. They were able to gently, lovingly separate and remain friends, realizing that relationship was not appropriate for them anymore. So there are many different outcomes, but to create outcomes based in our human lives as love, rather than out of our pained, dissociated minds, it just changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome, sir. Well, thank you for the call and the questions, and I'll send that to you, and I'll give you a shout, and we'll get it set up for the codependence workshop.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
And we are down to the last minute. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate you, and hold the space for each and every person to have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world, and especially with all the craziness going on in the culture, it's certainly time for somebody to make a shift, and we're here to support that happening. Have a blessed one. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.